What's up, everybody? John the Morgile here. Doing a quick video update because I've gotten quite a bit of emails and messages and correspondence through Facebook and whatnot. And as usual, I want to apologize for being pretty poor about getting back to everyone in a timely fashion. So I do apologize, and I want to thank everyone for your kind words and encouragement and all that. It really means a lot to me. Anyway, I also want to thank all of the live listeners for the live show, the static show, which I've been doing to the best of my ability on Saturdays. Since I'm working outside of the home again for the first time in many years, I'm gonna do the Wednesday shows only when I can, which will probably be not that often. So just sort of an update on that. I'll keep doing the Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern shows for sure. But I really just wanted to post this as an update to sort of, reply or respond to everyone that's been emailing and messaging me through different social media. And again, apologize for not getting back to everyone. Really, the main point or the main reason that I'm shooting this brief video is in response to a lot of the typical comments that I get, because I do from time to time try to read through some comments and reply, and I just get so many ridiculous arguments from globbers who just claim, the earth is a globe because whatever, fill in the blank. We all know the arguments. And my position on this is pretty clear. First thing, prove curvature, prove axial rotation, prove orbital mechanics. None of these exist. There is no curvature that you would expect on a ball with a circumference of 25,000 miles, radius of about 4,000 miles. You can measure for it, it isn't there. Nor is it spinning. And we have good, solid, tangible, physical evidence through repeatable experiments that show there's no curvature and it's not spinning. So beyond that, you can go ahead and try to prove the galactic frame of reference, the solar frame of reference, all of these theoretical mind-boggling speeds, but really they're moot points. They're irrelevant, because if there is no axial rotation, which is over 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, 1,037.5 miles per hour at the equator, and there should be, well, 2/3 feet of curvature per mile squared, 0.666 feet per mile squared. It's fairly easy spherical mathematics, it's simple geometry. And until you can prove that, then you don't have an argument. Claiming that the Earth is a globe isn't proof. The fact that you grew up watching Star Wars or watching rockets launched by NASA doesn't prove the Earth is a globe. Because you think the sun is a sphere, or because you think the moon is a sphere, and they may well be, doesn't prove that the Earth is a sphere. So I just wanted to get this out there again, and I've made tons of videos. I'm working on some more, as I mentioned, but I just get really tired of the just gobs and gobs of comments that are logically fallacious, broken logic, and we're all very familiar with these arguments and the idea of the heliocentric model, the spherical Earth idea. It's not news to flat earthers or globe Earth skeptics, as it were. So I would just, beg those of you out there who feel like you want to comment on videos and say, "Ha ha, you're so stupid because everyone knows the Earth is a sphere." Well, prove it. You know, I'm in South Carolina, so according to you, I'm spinning eastwardly at about 800 miles an hour, dropping vertically along that curve at around 100 miles an hour, according to you, globbers. Um, Prove it. Where's your evidence?
Another really important point that was actually brought up on the live show this past week involves some, again, fairly basic geometry involving a sphere. The 8 inches per mile squared, or the 2/3 feet per mile squared curvature, is based on traveling east at the equator. So that would be a 25,000-mile radius. The further north or south, the further away you get from the equator and travel due east, you're actually traveling along a much tighter arc, or a much smaller radius curve. And if you want to argue this point, just picture a basketball and draw a ring around the center of it, and keeping it in the same upright position, draw a ring around, closer towards the top of it. And what you'll certainly notice is that, again, this is just strictly traveling in an east to west direction for this example. You're going to have a much tighter curve, and therefore you're going to have much more obvious curvature. And so the further north you go, the east to west curvature calculations would be, changed up quite a bit. I don't think that it's necessary to even delve that deeply into the geometry, because it's just such an obvious point. You have to accept it as fact. And hopefully the graphics I'm throwing up here will help to show that. But it's worth mentioning. People will obviously argue, well, a sphere is a sphere, and whichever way you go on it, it's always going to have the 25,000-mile radius, of course. But obviously, this is dealing with a sphere spinning on an axis with a magnetic north and east to west based on that. So, there you have it.
Prove it. Where's your evidence? Uh, it isn't there. I'd love to see it. I've been searching for it. Lots of people have. Unfortunately, and I've for the last year and some change, I've been making videos pointing this sort of thing out, but you've been programmed. The psyop, the psychological operation, is not flat Earth. The Earth is indeed a stationary plane. It's been proven. The heliocentric model has been thoroughly falsified. It's been debunked. The globe Earth has. And so until the globe Earth team can come up with better arguments than the ones that we're familiar with, the masts of ships appearing over the horizon before the hole, like Christopher Columbus mentioned, and you know, all these ridiculous arguments that have been debunked. I just wish that the Globe Earth team would bring more to the table than conjecture, ridicule. This is not how scientific debates go. Now, the heliocentric model, the globe Earth model, is the leading, widely accepted model of the universe. It's the widely accepted model of how things work. And so you could consider that as sort of the standard, widely accepted model. And I like to think of this as sort of a court of law, is a good way to put it. And so in this case, the heliocentric model would be the prosecution. And I would like to liken myself in this analogy to a defense attorney defending the static plane model, or the stationary plane Earth model. And my job, as it were, is not to necessarily prove that the Earth is a stationary plane, which it is, and it has been proven, but all we have to do is to cast even a shadow of doubt on the widely accepted model or on the widely accepted theory, which starts with a big bang. Uh, how ridiculous is that? I mean, you globbers actually believe that you live stuck to the side of a spinning sphere that's flying through space, well, 66,600 miles an hour around the sun. The sun is supposedly zipping around the galactic equator at half a million miles an hour, and the galaxy itself is supposedly zipping along through space at some millions of miles an hour. And so, how many times would you have to, you know, cause an explosion in a perfect vacuum that would allow for life to exist stuck to the side of a spinning sphere on a piece of the shrapnel? The whole thing is ridiculous. And so, by simply proving through measurement and experimentation that there's no curvature, or that it's not spinning, or that it's not orbiting the sun, and on and on and on to the galactic frame of reference, simply by casting even the smallest amount of doubt and showing alternate hypotheses that could explain observations as well or better than the prosecution, then that's really all we have to do, technically. Now, unfortunately, we're dealing with, up to 500 years of pretty intense programming that's gotten so intense in the last 100 years, and well, certainly in our lifetimes, with the amount of science fiction and pageantry and romanticism that goes along with, things like Star Wars, Star Trek, all of the science fiction films and documentaries about, Earth-like planets and faraway galaxies. By the way, the galaxy, or galaxies other than the Milky Way, weren't even theorized until 1929 by Hubble. And so, I guess the point that I wanted to make is just sort of a blanket response to the many, many comments and messages that I receive from people who think that I'm stupid or think that they're very smart because they believe the Earth is a spinning sphere in outer space. Unfortunately, and I hate to be so blunt, but that's ridiculous. It's the most preposterous thing you could imagine. Um, Even if the moon is a spinning sphere, which I have my doubts on that, but even if it is, that doesn't mean that the Earth is a sphere. So again, I would just beg, the globbers out there, the pro-globers, many of whom don't even realize and don't fully realize what the conventional model consists of to the full extent, come with some evidence. Uh, but unfortunately, there's just a mountain of empirical evidence that proves conclusively that the Earth is not a spinning sphere, and your arguments, many of them are null and void. So again, you know, prove curvature over a standing body of water. Prove axial rotation of over 1,000 miles an hour at the equator. And then we'll go from there. Then we'll start looking at the solar frame of reference and the galactic frame of reference. But until then, it's sort of an open and shut case. Um, One of the topics that has really fascinated me throughout my whole life, and maybe this is a psyop, maybe it's not, is the idea of extraterrestrial visitors, visitors from other worlds. Um, and I still sort of have a special place in my heart for that whole thing. It's very romantic. It's sort of to some degree it's comforting to think that there are sentient beings elsewhere in the universe that come and visit our world and do whatever it is they do, zip around in little saucers or whatever. But the point that I want to make, and I think that this is a good topic for discussion, is there are literally millions of people out there who firmly believe in aliens, extraterrestrial visitors. And I think that when you mention flat Earth, or when you bring up the topic of flat Earth to them and explain that space doesn't exist and NASA has been faking space, I think that they're sort of turned off, or they feel like their romantic ideas of extraterrestrials is being threatened by flat Earth. And I would say that that also is ridiculous. The reason being, and I have mentioned this before, but I want to unpack this quickly, and we'll probably talk about it on the live show on Saturday, is that extraterrestrial visitors, or visitors from other worlds, are theoretically possible in the stationary plane Earth model. I don't believe for a second that the boundaries to our world are finite. So, in other words, in the conventional model, if you go north to the North Pole and keep heading in that same direction along that same meridian line, then you'll just sort of loop back around, and wind up at the South Pole eventually and just keep going around in circles. So they've sort of caged us in prison for our minds, right? But if you consider the idea that the only boundary to our world is a superficial boundary, the southernmost path of the sun during the southern summer is really just a superficial boundary. What's beyond that? I know there's a lot of debate in terms of what is the actual map, what is the actual model. Well, we know for sure it's not a globe, but if the Earth is a plane, then there could be other solar systems adjacent to ours, or nearby, or 10,000 miles away, but certainly not 50 light years or billions or quadrillions of miles. The point is, it's theoretically impossible for, aliens to locate and travel to our little planet, to our little solar system, to our little galaxy uh, in that model. It's theoretically not possible. It's not going to happen. On the other hand, in the flat Earth model, it's very possible that we could have visitors from other worlds, just not in the respect that you may think. So when I say that space doesn't exist, what I mean, obviously you can see stars in the sky, but what I mean is those stars are not suns, they're not galaxies, they're just lights in the sky. Uh, Nobody's going there, nobody's coming from there. So if you are a person who has seen UFOs, or if you know somebody who has, or if you're a person who's been abducted by aliens, um, maybe it's not so crazy, even coming from a flat Earth perspective. In fact, it is theoretically possible. So I just wanted to sort of point that out as well. Um, and that's the point I made this quick little video. Is again, just to recap to the globbers out there, you know, prove curvature should be pretty easy. Prove axial rotation should be a breeze. I mean, physics is the study of bodies in motion. The Earth doesn't move, and that's been proven. Again, the second point is theoretically, aliens or extraterrestrials are theoretically possible. Once you've abandoned the heliocentric model, which is hogwash, preposterous nonsense. Um, and I have used this analogy before, but it really is the perfect analogy. If you can imagine, Santa Claus was something that everyone believed in, or, Christian American people believed in Santa Claus growing up. If you're a child, plug your ears. Um, But once you realize that, or when your parents or your sibling or whomever told you, Santa doesn't exist, yeah, you maybe felt a little hurt, betrayed, lied to. It's pretty bad to lie to your children for years and tell them that some fat guy with a beard pops down the chimney once a year and dumps presents underneath the tree in the house. That's a pretty preposterous lie. However, if nobody had ever told you that it was fake, that it was bullshit, excuse my language, but if no one had ever told you that, you would have continued on believing it. And at this point, would we be arguing? Would I have to be presenting evidence that Santa Claus doesn't exist? And once I've proven Santa Claus, or once we collectively have proven Santa Claus doesn't exist, do we then need to continue disproving, Mrs. Claus, the reindeer, Rudolph, and his red nose? Do we need to prove that Santa doesn't live in the North Pole as well? No, I mean, that's ridiculous. So this is exactly the same thing. We were all taught a preposterous, fantastic lie growing up when we were little children, and many of us didn't buy it. But who are we to argue with adults? Adults know everything when you're a child, and so at this point in our lives, we really need to sit down and reconsider the assumptions that we grew up with. And that's a difficult thing to do. I mean, it really is deeply rooted into our culture, the heliocentric model that is, and Santa Claus. And so, I would just ask people to skeptically analyze what you believe. And what you believe is that you live stuck to the side of a spinning sphere as the result of an explosion. Think about that for a minute. Now, not only do you believe that you live stuck to the side of a spinning sphere as the result of an explosion, but you also believe that that spinning sphere resides in an infinite vacuum. Um, and I've made, I don't know, 100 videos covering lots of different proofs that involve astronomy, orbital mechanics, curvature, and the lack thereof of all these things. And I've done some debates. I've done debunking videos of people claiming to debunk flat Earth. And most of the people who claim to debunk flat Earth or claim to have debunked flat Earth really don't understand it. So the first thing that you have to do is study it a little bit. Compare apples to apples the two models, flat Earth, sphere Earth. It's two totally different things, but it's fairly simple concepts to compare. And I can assure you that if you give this thing a fair shake, if you give this idea a skeptical scrutiny, you'll find that the spinning spherical Earth heliocentric model indeed is ridiculous. So just wanted to get that in there real quick. I've mentioned this a few times. I've got a few videos that are sort of in the works, in process. I've got some projects planned. It's just been sort of difficult. It's been a rough couple of months. We've moved around a little bit, but we're settled in to a new town. We're in Spartanburg, South Carolina, so we're making a go of it here. Things are going fairly well. So just wanted to, say hey to everyone and let everyone out there know that I do appreciate your correspondence. Again, apologize for not getting back in time. And yeah, I've got like over 5,000 unread emails in my Gmail account, so there's probably no way I'll ever get to them all, but I do sort of try. At any rate, check out the live shows Saturdays at 3 Eastern at Static Plain Truth Live. I'll be doing that this weekend, and be on the lookout for some new, sort of standard the Morgile videos that you guys are used to. It's just sort of hard to find time. Like, it's 8:30 p.m. now, and it's well past my bedtime, if you can believe that. I'm not really used to getting up at 4:30 in the morning, so one thing I would urge y'all to do, because I'm not boasting or anything. I've got almost 14,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I've got a lot of older videos that have barely been watched. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to start rotating the featured videos on my channel to where they're a little bit easier to find, because some of the older stuff is buried kind of low, at the bottom of the list, and it is kind of hard to navigate to those. And for some reason, my videos aren't really showing up on searches very well anymore. So I'm not complaining. I mean, there's just so much flat Earth material out there. There's some really good stuff going out, and of course, there's some pretty crappy stuff going out too. So hopefully, I'll be able to contribute more good stuff. If that is what it is, maybe I'm biased, but I tend to think that it's decent. But yeah, so definitely try to pop in Saturday at 3 o'clock Eastern. That's noon Pacific. By the way, Eastern is Greenwich Mean Time minus 0400. It did change recently. So, one thing I almost forgot to mention, if anyone out there is looking for a good place to tithe, if you want to help out and support a good cause, check out sogs.com. It's SOGSS, Shelter of God Sunday School, sogs.com, SOGSS.com. It's a youth ministry for orphans in Pakistan. It's a Christian organization. It's run by my Facebook friend Majida. So definitely check that out. A little bit goes a long way. And just so y'all know, I don't benefit from this in any way, other than it makes me happy to see people getting help who need it. So anyway, just thought I would mention that. And I've got I've got a few other Facebook friends who are in similar situations where they're running, missions and orphanages overseas and that sort of thing, and they really need a lot of help. And a little bit goes a long way. The U.S. dollar, although it's lost, well, virtually all of its value over the last 100 years, it is still fairly, high up there in terms of, well, relatively compared to other currencies. So, and of course, if you want to support this channel, you can do so through PayPal at johnelance at gmail, or through fan funding on YouTube. So, anyways, thank you all so much. I will see you Saturday, and maybe on Wednesdays, if depending on if I have work that day. It's sort of hit or miss. I mentioned on the live show I've been working through a temp agency, so I sort of have to get down to the shop but early in the morning, and maybe go to work, maybe not. Here lately, I've been really busting my ass. You can see my nose is red. I've got a little bit of a farmer's tan going here, as you can see. So I'm getting lots of vitamin D that way. And not the vitamin D that Antonio Subarats has apparently been getting.
So let's see what you think of this.
Just noticed that sexy video, whatever that was. I got to talk to Antonio about that. Not sure what's going on with that, buddy. But anyway, God bless y'all. Spread the word, spread the world, and peace.